Hey, welcome to Real Estate Resource. Thanks for stopping by. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. I really hope you enjoy this video. So last week we started the listing agreement, and today we're going to finish it. I have all the faith in the world that we're going to finish it today. Before I share my screen and get started, did anybody have any questions about anything? No? All right. Well, let's share the screen and jump right in. So right now, you guys should be looking at, excuse me, excuse me, geez. This is the listing agreement. And last week we went through the ways that you could be compensated as an agent, right? There's 4 ways that you can be compensated based on this listing agreement. The most common one, obviously, is you sell the listing. The second one is if the listing expires or cancels and you give that seller a list of all of the potential buyers or people who wrote offers, if one of those people were to write an offer within the time you specified in paragraph A2, then you would step back in as listing agent. The third way, again, we're recapping. The third way is if for some reason the listing were to, or the transaction were to cancel and it wasn't the fault of the seller, and, I'm sorry, I skipped one. Third way is the seller makes the property unmarketable, doesn't allow you to show it, doesn't keep it up, doesn't keep the utilities on, those kind of things. Transfers the property, leases the property without our permission once it's listed. In those instances, also, they could be liable to pay the whole commission. And the fourth way, which I jumped the gun to, which is the buyer cancels, the seller's able to retain their deposit or some other kind of damages because of the default of the buyer. We're entitled to 50% of their recovery up to a maximum of our original commission. So those are the 4 ways that the listing agreement dictates for compensation to the broker and to the listing agent, okay? If we are now moving on from that, we could also put in here if there was some kind of a bonus in paragraph 3C would be how, they're going to pay you a bonus, or they're going to pay for the transaction coordinator commission, which is the $275 that we charge, right? That's what would go into that. In addition, seller agrees to pay broker. So anything above and beyond that original commission that was agreed upon in paragraph 3A. Okay. 3D, seller has been advised of broker's policy regarding cooperation with and the amount of compensation offered to other brokers. The broker is authorized to cooperate with and compensate brokers participating through the multiple listing services by offering to MLS brokers out of broker's compensation specified in paragraph 3A, either box checked, blank percent, or of the purchase price, or a flat dollar amount. Now, in this residential purchase agreement or listing agreement, you have to disclose to the seller the amount of compensation you are offering to MLS participants. Okay? This paragraph 3D is specific. 3D1 is specific to MLS, my sharing of commission with MLS participants. Okay, so what that means is that that's what I'm going to offer out. When I put this listing active into the MLS and I show the compensation that I am paying to a buyer's agent to bring their buyer and to purchase the property, that is the percentage that's going there. And it is a percentage of the purchase price, right? So that's out of my compensation. So if we were to look at this as a whole, that compensation that's stated in 3A, that 6%, that 6%, let's say, is, for an example, is what is being paid to us, the listing brokerage. And then from that 6%, I am offering out, I am the broker, listing agent and listing broker, I'm offering to cooperating brokers 3% of the purchase price, right? So 50% of that, whatever the amount is that you want to offer out. That is something that has to be shared with the seller. So when you fill out this listing agreement, you can't leave that part blank. You can't leave the section in 3D1 blank, based on the conversations you have with the seller. You have to disclose to the seller how much you're offering out, and then you have to disclose it right there in that paragraph. Okay. Now remember, 3D1 is solely for MLS participants. See, that's important because it's expensive to become a realtor, right? It is expensive to get that realtor tag and to have access to the MLS. It costs you money. It is a cost of doing business. And there are agents out there that are refusing to pay that cost. So when I make this declaration to my seller that, hey, this is what I'm offering out to the agents that are participating in the MLS, when I go to 3D2, there's a different sentence there that says broker is authorized to cooperate with and compensate brokers operating outside the MLS as per broker's policy. So what that means is that if somebody writes an offer on your property, is represented by an agent who is not a member of the multiple listing service, I do not have to abide by that amount of commission that is declared in 3D1. I can give any amount of compensation I want. And that works the same way like any MLS. So if I have a listing and I put that listing as active and I get a phone call from another agent, and that agent says, hey, yeah, I'm submitting an offer on your property. There are agents out there that use other people's MLS logins, and they sign in and they get the information that is supposed to be solely for people who are realtors and members of the MLS, of the multiple listing service. So they use somebody else's ID to get into the system, and they're submitting offers. And they know the compensation that's being offered, right? And we leave it at that when they submit the offer. My suggestion to all of you guys are, especially in this market that we're in, is I would be asking for the public ID of anybody that's submitting an offer, and especially if they ask me about commission, I would ask for their public ID. If they do not have a public ID, then what you would send them would be a cooperating broker compensation with a different commission amount. If you choose to do that, you would have the right to do that. You're not bound by that 2.5%, 3% that you've offered in the MLS. If they are not a participating member, they're not a realtor, they haven't paid their dues, they're not legit, and they're writing offers, you are not held to that same standard. So for those of you that are watching this video or in this class right now and are practicing real estate without being MLS members or board members, keep in mind that your compensation is not protected by anything. The listing agent could pay you whatever commission they want to pay you if you're not a board member. So keep that in mind, okay? 3E, seller hereby irrevocably assigns to broker the above compensation from seller's funds and proceeds in escrow. Broker may submit this agreement as instructions to compensate broker pursuant to paragraph 3A to any escrow regarding the property involving seller and a buyer, prospective buyer, or other transferee. So this is just a copy of this listing agreement would go to the escrow company to show what commission compensation is being paid to the brokers. So in the chat, it's a participating ID. It's the public ID, so your username that you use when you sign in the MLS, that's your public ID. So, you know, CRMLS and each board has a different public ID, like structure, right? So like for the Downey board, some are DW, some are Y, the older ones, right? Each different realtor board has different public IDs, but that's the public ID that I'm referring to when you request that from an agent writing an offer on your property. So they're saying, hey, look, seller in 3E is saying, hey, we're paying you this commission. We're not taking it away from you. And we talked about what irrevocably means in regards to this contract in the last class. Okay. So now 3F1, going back to when we start looking at 3F, going back to that paragraph here that we talked about earlier in 3A3, which was this right here, the exceptions, right? If within blank calendar days, and I always suggest you guys write 180. This paragraph right here is linked to this one. So here, what the first one is the seller is representing that they were not previously entered into a listing agreement with another broker regarding the property unless specified as follows. So if I go on a listing appointment today and do my presentation to the seller, one of the questions I would ask them is, hey, were you listed? Was this property listed previously? You would have to ask that, obviously, if it wasn't, say, an expired listing that you were going on. Right now, if I got this listing appointment because I was prospecting expired listings, then I would already know, hey, you were at least listed with one broker prior to this. So when I ask that question, hey, were you listed with another broker? If they say yes, then I have to list the brokers that they were listed with down here in the listing agreement. If they were not, if their answer to that question was, no, I was not listed with a previous broker, then I would write in this section, or should write in this section to help protect my interest, seller states no, right? Like the seller has told me they don't have any previous listings, okay? In the chat, somebody says, where would we ask for the ID? Can we ask for that on the counter? No, not in the counter. That's a conversation on the phone. If you get an offer and you're questioning whether or not that agent is licensed, there's two things you could do. You could go into the MLS and go into the roster, search their name, see if the public ID comes up. If it doesn't, then you could call them and ask them, hey, your public ID is not coming up. What's your public ID? That would be I would only do it if I was questioning that they were agents. But you guys should be checking. You should be checking. As a matter of fact, I just got a question earlier today from an agent that submitted an offer to the agent that was listed on the MLS, and that agent that was listed as the listing agent on the MLS was the broker. And that broker called them back and said, no, I'm not. That's not the correct listing agent. This is the correct listing agent. So either the original listing agent wasn't a board member, and the broker was putting it on the MLS for him, or that listing agent that had it with the brokerage left, and now the broker is just taking over the listing. So keep those things in mind. It changes, right? Stuff happens. If the seller says yes, but I don't have the information, you're meaning about being listed with a prior broker? I mean, if they were listed with a prior broker and they have a listing agreement, I mean, you're going to have the information. All you need is the broker's name. That's it. If they don't know it, then you could put right in there that the seller doesn't have the information for the previous broker. All we're putting in there is to make sure that we're aware of any of those exceptions. Like another listing agent isn't going to come back later and try to take our place as, as the listing agent. So that's the brokers if they were listed before. F2 is, these are the exception list, right? Seller warrants that seller has no obligation to pay compensation to any other broker regarding the property unless the property is transferred to any of the following individuals or entities. So going back to that paragraph where if the listing expires or cancels and I give them a list of exceptions, give them a list of buyers that wrote offers or people that saw the property, and they sell to one of those people, they have to give that list over to their new broker. So if I have that conversation, for example, let's just say that it is with Gilbert, and I say, Gilbert, as seller, were you listed prior? And he says, yes, I was listed with ABC Real Estate. Terrific. Did your listing agent with that brokerage give you a list of exceptions of people that you could not sell to? No, they didn't. Then I would put in F2, seller states no. If he did, then I would put see attached list, and I would attach to the listing agreement that list of exceptions. And then if any of those people were to write an offer, what I would do is I would say to the seller, okay, I'm stepping out. I've contacted your previous listing agent. They are now going to step in and represent you in the sale of this house. That's the way it's supposed to work. Now, the chances of that happening are, as Chick Hearn used to say, slim and none, and Slim just left town. Most listing agents do not keep an exception list. And again, like we talked about last week, is who's monitoring those old listings to see who sold to who, right? So, the chances of that happening, but just to cover yourself, ask the question, do you have an exception list? Did your previous broker give you a list of buyers who you were not allowed to sell to, or if you did sell to, they were your listing agent for a specific period of time? Did they give you that list? No, they didn't. Okay, seller states no. I'm going to write that in there, okay? Now, a couple things on this first page. If there is no exception list or no previous broker and you write seller states no, even though it doesn't call for that, I would maybe have the seller initial that. Okay. Same thing as if you wanted to be super thorough in these compensation paragraphs here, because there are ways that they would have to get paid. You could also have the seller initial. That's going really far, right? so that the seller understands that those paragraphs exist and that we explained it to them. The thing is that most agents, and I would guess that probably a lot of you, even on this class live right now or watching this video later, do not explain that there are 4 ways that there is a possible compensation due. You don't have the conversation with the seller about them making the property unmarketable. You don't have the conversation with the seller about should the listing expire or cancel, that you're going to give them a list of people who saw the home and that you may be their listing agent on a future sale if one of those exception list people purchases it. Nobody talks about the damages. We don't explain those things to them, but it is in the listing agreement. And the reason that we don't explain those things to them is because we're afraid it's going to scare the seller off. The problem is that every other agent that they speak to is going to have them sign the exact same contract, and those other agents aren't going to explain it to them, but you are, right? And so part of us being professional is that we're making sure that they understand that that's what's happening in each one of in this listing agreement, is that there's the potential for compensation to be paid, and they understand that. The farther you go with that explanation and saying, okay, I need you to initial next to this paragraph, even though it doesn't call for it, because I want there to be some kind of active representation that you understood and that I explained it to you, so that later there's no questions. You don't have to do it. I'm just saying that's like you could go a step beyond if you really wanted to show that you had explained to people the compensation that was due. Okay. Again, at the bottom of this, it says if the property is sold to anyone listed above during the time seller is obligated to compensate another broker, broker is not entitled compensation under this agreement, and broker is not obligated to represent the seller. So the reason that's important, and the reason why I like to put seller states no in these sections, is because if they do give us a list, let's say, for example, Gilbert, my seller, says, yes, I was listed with ABC Real Estate, and here is a list of 10 people that wrote an offer or saw the property, okay? And he gives me that list. What happens is the contract is saying, I am now not due any compensation for that specific buyer, that particular buyer. And what happens is that I'm not your broker for that particular buyer, so the other broker has to come back. Now, if the seller states, so that means I'm not getting paid. They're paying one commission, and they're paying a commission to another broker, and whatever the rules were with that other broker, right? Now, what happens is this. If I write seller states no, and then another broker comes forward and has proof of this list of exceptions that was delivered to the seller, right? Now the seller's going to owe 2 commissions legally. They're going to have the original exception, the original listing broker that gave them the exception list, that they're entitled to pay because that broker did their job. And because they lied to me, they're going to be liable for paying me compensation also. Does that make sense? Right? So those are the things that you guys have to keep in mind, is that's why it's important that you have that seller states no in there, is because now that's my proof that I ask the seller the question. I ask them if they had an exception list. If I don't make that extra step, take that extra step of asking the questions and writing in there that the seller is telling me that they don't have any list, now it's the seller's responsibility. If I don't do that, and now the other broker comes back, and I don't have that, hey, seller states no, I don't have the proof that I had that question. Now what happens is when I try to fight them and say, you never told me you had an exception list, well, prove that I never told you. There's nothing in here, but you didn't ask me the question. And it's going to be hard. It's going to be a harder fight to try to get what's due me as well as what they have to pay that other broker. Does that make sense?
Kyle, so that would be F2? No?
On F2 is the list of the exceptions. F1 is the list of the brokers that they were previously listed with. Okay?
Thank you.
So you're not going to fit a list in these 2 lines. So you're going to either say see attached list or see addendum, something with that list in there. Okay? So that just make sure you're asking that question. Do you have a list of exceptions from your previous broker? If they say no, put seller states no, and then I would take that extra step of having them initial next to it, that they're acknowledging that they told you there was no list. Now, here's the thing that'll happen probably. If you do that and then you ask them to initial where there is no initial, and they do have an exception list, they might all of a sudden get their memory might come back like, oh, wait a minute. Exception list. Oh, yeah. Oh, no, the list of people who saw the property. Yeah, I have that. Here it is. So keep that in mind, Okay. Items included, excluded. So, unless otherwise specified in the purchase agreement, all the fixtures and fittings are included, right? So, anything that's a fixture, we've talked about that in the past, and we'll get into more details about fixtures and we'll get into fixtures and things when we talk about disclosures, but anything that's a fixture is going to stay unless we specify it here. So I know that we're going to put it on the MLS and I know that we're going to counter it. I know we're going to put it in purchase agreements and things like that to make sure that those things are included and excluded. But if the seller tells me specifically when I'm doing the listing agreement that something is excluded, I'm going to put it in the listing agreement also. I'm going to make it, I'm going to really kind of cover myself, right? So I'm going to have the excluded items and included items, right? The things that are included that normally wouldn't be included, right? Things that aren't fixtures like washers and dryers, refrigerators, standalone stoves, stuff like that. Okay. I'm going to put those in. Are there any leased or non-owned items, right? Solar systems, alarm systems, propane tanks, water softeners, anything that the seller has included that they're still paying for, and the same thing with there's a lien. I want to put it on here because I want to know ahead of time. Question in the chat. What if you took someone to see the property and that buyer then ditches you, negotiate directly with the listing agent? Then you're out of luck. That procuring cause only exists if you write an offer. Even if I have a buyer representation agreement, so let's talk about for a second procuring cause and how that works. I have a buyer. I meet a buyer at an open house. They call me. I prospect and find them, and I go and show them properties. I show them a list of properties. They don't want to write an offer on any of those properties, but they think about it and they go back and they call the listing agent instead of calling me. And the listing agent says, yeah, listen, I don't have any offers right now. You guys want it, write an offer with me. We're good to go. We'll get started. It's yours. So they do. They write that offer with them. I don't have any right to interfere with that transaction. I'm not their agent, right? Just because they signed an agency disclosure and I showed them the property, I have no right to it. Now, next scenario is they do the exact same thing, but I have a buyer representation agreement, exclusive, signed with them. And we've discussed it before in the past. Now, it still doesn't mean that that is my commission. But what it does mean is that not only will they can go ahead and purchase the property with that listing agent, but they're going to owe me compensation for purchasing that home as long as it matches the criteria that was in that buyer representation agreement. Okay, that's the second scenario. But that's still not procuring costs. I don't get to step in and be the agent. The only way procuring cause exists is if I take those buyers out, we write an offer. That offer gets rejected or doesn't even get presented, but it was sent in. And then a week later, they go back to the listing agent or to any other agent and say, we really love this house. We submitted an offer, but we didn't get it. And then they submit another offer and it gets accepted. Then I have procuring cause. What the board and CAR and everybody says is procuring cause is the agent that was strong enough to procure the offer. That is procuring cause. If you got them to sign their name on a contract and you submitted it, then you have procuring cause. You were the reason that the buyer was introduced to that property. And if they are represented by any agent going forward on that specific property, then you are owed the commission because you were the procuring cause for that purchase. Okay, so that's the only way. Only if you submit an offer is the only way that you can fight procuring cause. If you show somebody a property and they ultimately go back and write that offer with the listing agent of that property, there's nothing you could do about it. Nothing you could do about it. Okay, go ahead, Jesus. You have your hand up.
What if this agent was not a very good agent and or negotiator, and they don't get the offer, the buyers don't get the offer accepted, but they really like property. They come to you and they say, can you see if you can get it for us? And then you get 30, 40,000 market below asking price, below the offer they wrote. To lose
and what's the difference between my scenario that I just discussed, where an agent wrote an offer, didn't get accepted, and they went with another agent? There's no difference. Doesn't matter if your offer is less. Doesn't matter if your offer is more. Doesn't matter if it's, written with red ink instead of blue. If they wrote an offer on that property with another agent, that agent has procuring cause. Nothing changes that, period. End of story. Doesn't matter if that agent was garbage. Doesn't matter if the buyer hated that agent still has procuring cause. And that's how it works. So, whenever you get that phone call as listing agent, and they have a buyer that says, yeah, hey, remember we wrote an offer? We hate our agent. Our agent sucks. He couldn't write a good enough offer to get accepted, but we really want the house. Will you write us an offer? The answer to that question is no. Because if that other agent ever finds out that you wrote an offer with his client, he'll let you go through the whole transaction, represent the client, do all the work, close the escrow. Then they'll go to the board, pay $500. They'll go after you for procuring cause, and they will have the right to your entire compensation. The buyer's half of it, not the listing side, but the buyer's half that you represented them. So you'll do all the work for zero. They'll get your money. So if you absolutely have to represent that buyer, then what you should be doing is reach out to the other agent that wrote the offer and say, hey, listen, your buyer doesn't want to work with you anymore. You're going to get zero from them because they don't want to work with you anymore. But they do want to work with me. So if I represent them and they write an offer on my property and it gets accepted, I will pay you a 25% referral. And if they don't accept the 25% referral, right, because you're the listing agent, I'm not talking about just this one only where you're the listing agent. If they don't accept the 25% referral, then you go back to the buyer and you say, sorry, buyer, right? You're going to have to rewrite your offer with that agent because I'm not going to work for free. Now, maybe 25, if they go to 30, maybe you still consider it. But at that point, especially if you're the listing agent, there is no need for you to be giving away your buyer's commissions right now just because that buyer says to you they want to buy the house. Now, if it's a business decision and you choose that you want to give up more commission, 50%, things like that, go for it. Now, there have been cases, and recently, where I've had conversations with agents where they had a procuring cause issue, where a buyer had written an offer with another agent, met them, said, hey, I still want this property. I went into escrow and it canceled, and I'd love for you to represent me. And I know that, that agent talked to the listing agent. They were able to negotiate to get that offer accepted, right? Or could get that offer accepted, but there was another agent that had procuring cause. So that agent had to go back to the previous agent, try to negotiate to keep from losing all of it. And that agent said, no, you can't represent them unless you give me 50%. Now, it's not their listing. So they either have to get zero and not represent this buyer, or give up 50% of their commission and represent the buyer. That's ultimately becomes a business decision for that agent, what you want to do. So keep in mind that procuring cause is not a joke, and it does happen a lot. And the difference between procuring cause and an exception for a listing that's canceled is different because it's harder to track. It's harder to track a listing and who's buying it and all that stuff than it is to track a buyer that you've worked with in the past and see what they're up to. Okay? So keep that in mind. All right. So that's procuring costs. We talked about that. Okay? All right. So the leased out items, what they are, the liened items, what they are. This is a description of the multiple listing service, like what the MLS is, all that stuff. The information that's provided in the MLS. What you got to explain to your sellers is that once this information goes in the MLS, it stays in the MLS forever, right? Like you can't now you could take it out, but once it closes, the pictures that are in, the info that's in, all that stuff, it's there once you sell it. And it's going to be shared. It's going to go to all those, 5 or 100 or 1,000 websites. It's going to be all over the place. So they need to understand what's going to happen and what is going to be shared. What is broker's MLS? This is not Downey Association of Realtors for this office, right? It is not your Association of Realtors. It is the MLS you're a member of. And for us, that is CRMLS. Okay, so that is always going to be CRMLS. Okay. This MLS is the primary MLS for the geographic area or is not. Now, the reason that's important is because for those of you guys that are here in Southern California, you know that you go to places like Bakersfield and other surrounding areas that have their own MLS that do not reciprocate with CRMLS. And we still take those listings even though we're not board members there, right? So you guys go to Fresno and you go to Bakersfield and you go, out into the desert, and you go all these places that have their own separate MLS, and the CRMLS is not the primary MLS for that geographic area. You have to check the box and let them know, that the potential seller, that it is not. Okay? So please make sure you're checking the box. You're being clear on what the MLS is that you're going to be listing the property in, and be clear that if you are not the primary MLS for the listing is taken, that you're disclosing that to the seller. What happens if you misfill out this part of the CRMLS? Well, I mean, technically, you're just not disclosing properly the information to the seller. I mean, nothing's going to happen. You're not going to lose your license. The listing is not invalid. It's just, let's be clear and correct in the information that we're sharing with the seller, okay? But nothing's really going to happen. It just needs to be proper. Okay. This little paragraph right here is really explaining to the seller why it's important for the MLS, the exposure that you get. And the reason for that is because the MLS, right, CRMLS and other MLSs, and even CAR and NAR, right, the National Association of Realtors and California Association of Realtors, believe that the majority of time that listing agents exclude their listings from the MLS, it is the listing agent's choice to make that exclusion, not the seller's. And to be honest, I kind of lean that direction also. That normally when a listing agent is excluding something from the MLS, the majority of the time, it is the listing agent's choice to do that. It is not a request from the seller. Now, are there sellers that request don't put it in the MLS? Absolutely, 100% all the time. But what NAR and CAR are trying to avoid is pocket listings, where you guys are holding on to a listing, not exposing it to the general public, in order for you to be the only person that knows about it to market it and procure a buyer, okay? So they want to hear what this is really you explaining to the seller what it means to have the property in the MLS and what the impact of opting out of the MLS is, okay? So listing property with the MLS exposes the seller's property to all real estate agents and brokers and their potential buyers and clients who are participants or subscribers to the MLS or a reciprocating MLS. The MLS may further transmit the MLS database to internet sites and post property listings online. The impact of opting out of the MLS. If seller elects to exclude the property from the MLS, seller understands and acknowledges that seller is authorizing limited exposure of the property and no marketing or advertising of the property to the public will occur. You got to remember that. If I don't put it in the MLS, if it doesn't go into the MLS as an active or a coming soon, I, as listing agent and listing broker, cannot market the property. I can't put a sign up. I can't door knock it. I can't cold call it. I can't do an open house. I can do nothing. So basically what you're saying here is they're explaining this to the seller that, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, if your listing agent is coming to you with a marketing technique of we're going to hold it out of the MLS for a certain amount of time, you need to know that this is what's happening with it. Okay. Now, if the seller has a real reason for wanting to withhold it, this is not going to be an issue. Okay. The reduction in exposure, any reduction in exposure property may lower the number of offers and negatively impact the sales price. We know that to be true. Absolutely know that to be true. Not listing a property in local M. If the property is listed in the MLS, which does not cover the geographic area where the property is located, then real estate agents or brokers working that territory and buyers they represent looking for property in the neighborhood may not be aware of the property for sale. And that's only fair. If I'm listing a property in Bakersfield and I know that very few properties in Bakersfield show up on the CRMLS because they have their own MLS, then that has to be explained to the seller that, hey, by listing with me, the exposure you're getting is going to be less, especially in your specific area. Now, in other areas of the state, it's going to be all over the place, okay? Question in the chat, if client doesn't want it posted on the MLS, what would we do to find buyer if we weren't allowed to market or advertise it? Tough one. I don't know what you would do. It's really difficult. When they exclude it from the MLS, and we're going to talk about that clear cooperation process and properties and the policy and all that stuff right now next. But if the client says, I don't want this in the MLS at all, okay, so I can't put a sign. So we're not going to get any sign calls. I can't door knock it, do open houses, or cold call it, right? So we're not going to get that kind of exposure. So the only thing I can do is I can only show it to buyers who I've previously signed a agency disclosure with in the previous year. So if I do have a list of buyers that I have shown properties to or worked with in the past, then I can take them and show it. But I can't call the general public. I can tell everybody here in the office, hey, I have this listing, but it can't be, you can't cold call it, we can't market it. But if you have a buyer that may be interested, we can set up something to buyer if your buyer has a agency disclosure signed. So it really does limit the ability for you to market the property. Okay. So that's it. You can't. You can't. If it's not in the MLS, you can't. Now, if I do decide to start marketing it because we've excluded it, the day after the first marketing happens, the day after a sign goes up, the day after I do an open house, the day after I door knock it, the day after I make phone calls, I have to put it in the MLS as active or coming soon. One day after I take that action of marketing it. Okay. So here we're going to talk about that public marketing of the property. So the clear cooperation policy is what was set up by NAR and CAR, which is that all listings have to go into the MLS, one way or the other. Okay? We're going to get to that right now about how you withhold it or don't and all of those things. Okay? Clear cooperation policy. MLS rules require that residential real property with 1 to 4 units and vacant lot listings be submitted to the MLS within 1 business day of any public marketing. We just talked about that. Public marketing within clear cooperation. Public marketing includes, but is not limited to, flyers displayed in windows, yard signs, digital marketing, public-facing websites, brokerage website displays, digital communications, marketing and email blasts, multi-brokerage listing sharing networks, marketing to closed or private listing clubs or groups, and applications available to the general public. Public marketing does not include an office-exclusive listing where there is direct promotion of the listing between the brokers and licensees affiliated with the listing brokerage, and one-to-one promotion between these licensees and their clients. So we talked about that. I can market it in here, in under this roof, and then my agents here, the other agents that work here, can tell their buyers about it. But they can't do cold calling, door knocking, put out flyers, put it on Facebook, put it on Instagram, put it on their website. It can't be anywhere. Now, the next section, right, that's something that's excluded, and what has to happen even then, when a listing is excluded, I'm not going to market it. I still have to, what they call, register it with the MLS. And the registration is just that, what the listing number, the address is, who the listing agent is. It's a separate thing. It doesn't go public. Nobody sees it, but it is a record of it in the MLS. I still have to do that within 2 days of taking the listing. Then there's coming soon. Coming soon, seller's advised to discuss with broker the meaning of coming soon, as that term applies to the MLS in which the property will be listed and how any coming soon status will impact when and how the listing will be viewable to the public via the MLS. Seller does or does not authorize broker to utilize coming soon status, if any. Seller is further advised to discuss with broker how any days on market calculations or similar utilized tracking field works in the MLS in which the property will be listed. Okay, so coming soon, the difference between the registered and coming soon. Coming soon, I can do everything that I want as if it were active. I can put it on Facebook, Instagram, my website, flyers, postcards, phone calls, door knock, everything except show it. While the listing is as coming soon, I cannot show it to anybody. Not to my own buyers, not to other buyers in this office. I can show it to no one when it's coming soon. Coming soon, I can do all the marketing. I can go door knocking. I can do everything. I just can't show it, okay? And coming soon does not have any effect on days on market. If I put it as coming soon, it doesn't start calculating days on market. As soon as I move it to active, days on market start. Coming soon is a maximum of 21 days. Once it is 21 days, once 21 days hit, it automatically switches to active. You can't extend it. You can't go from active back to coming soon. So understand that. What will happen if you show it? Okay, so if I violate any of these rules, if I market the property and don't put it in the MLS, right? So we talked about the public marketing, which is the registered listings. If I market it and I don't put it in the MLS, or if I show it while it's coming soon and somebody reports that I'm showing the property while it's listed as coming soon, it is an automatic fine with the CRMLS that you cannot fight. You have to pay it. There's no rebuttal. There's no argument. There is no warning. It is a $2,500 fine, and it is automatic if you violate any of these rules. So it's important, and that's for CRMLS rules. I mean, I don't know if people watching this video later are members of other boards, but the CRMLS The rules are it's a $2,500 fine. It's a percentage of your sales price, but the maximum is $2,500. And the sales prices that we're working within now, everybody's going to pay $2,500. We've had a couple in our office already that have violated it and have to pay the $2,500 fine. There's no way around it. There's no avoiding it. There's no fighting it. You can't hide from it. You can't put your head in the sand like an ostrich. You have to pay it. So if you take a listing within 2 days of taking that listing, and the CRMLS considers business days to be Monday through Saturday. So any 2 business days between Monday through Saturday. So if I take a listing on Thursday, like I take a listing today, it has to be in the MLS by Saturday. And it either has to be registered, coming soon, or active. And if it is not registered, coming soon, or active, I can get that $2,500 violation. Next, if I put it as registered and I start marketing it and then don't make it active within a day of that marketing, I also will get a $2,500 fine if somebody turns me in or if I get caught. The next one is if it's coming soon and I show it to somebody and I get caught showing it while it's coming soon, $2,500 fine. So you guys have to understand that it has to either be registered, coming soon, or active. It has to be done within 2 business days of taking the listing, and I cannot violate the rules that are in regards to those, which means if it's registered, I cannot market it. Registered took the place of excluded, right? We used to have the seller's exclusion from the multiple listing service. The form still exists, but there's no need to use it, and I'll show you why. But that registered now used to be excluded, okay? Then there's coming soon, which is just like active, other than I can't show it. And then there's active, where I can show it, do everything with it, okay? All right. Seller instructs broker. The MLS may require the sell, and they don't anymore. Seller instructs broker to market the property to the public and to start marketing on the beginning date of this agreement or a specific date. So if the seller doesn't want to exclude it at all, right, wants me to start marketing it, I could put it active or coming soon immediately, as soon as I take it. Now, if I take this listing today and the seller says, listen, I don't want you to market it until after Thanksgiving, right? So what is the Monday after Thanksgiving? So what is that, the 27th or whatever the date is? I don't know off the top of my head. That date I write in there, which means I don't do anything with it. I put it as registered in the MLS, but then I don't market it as coming soon or active until that date that is stated here in paragraph 7D, okay? Now, if I'm going to exclude it altogether, then I'm going to do 7D2, where it says seller instructs broker not to market the property to the public. And then it explains again, seller understands that no public marketing and all of that stuff, okay? So it's either this one if it's going to be withheld for a specific amount of time, or 7D2 if it's going to be withheld forever, okay? Now, even if it's withheld, it has to be put in as registered within 2 days of the listing agreement. And then once it closes, it has to be changed from registered to active to pending and closed. And you do it all at one time. And it has to happen like that. You have to do it that way. Or again, there could be some violations for misreporting. Okay? Questions about that part? Any questions? I know it's a lot, but that's a good place for us to talk about what happens with the MLS, because again, we've talked about this a number of times and we're still getting issues with people with violations and wanting to do things that are outside the policy. So if our listing coordinator, for example, is going to push back if you ask for a sign to be put up without it being active or coming soon, right, without it being in the MLS or all of those things, if you ask and they tell you no, it's because it'll cause a fine, and you still ask for it, we're going to send you something that says, hey, listen, we've advised you that there's going to be a fine. We'll still do what you're asking us to, but you're going to be responsible to pay that $2,500 fine. And remember, the violation of these rules, $2,500 fine, it is non-negotiable. Okay? What about listing agents who do not change status from active to active under contract or pending? That's also a violation. It's not as steep. I think it's like a $250 violation. But again, that's only if somebody reports them for not following it.
Can you repeat that again, please?
What's that?
About the 250?
I think it's 250. I'm not positive. If you have a listing and you accept an offer and you leave it as active, you don't move it to active under contract or to pending, that is a violation. It's not a $2,500 violation, but it is a violation. What proof do you have to? Yes, go ahead, Jesus.
What if they haven't deposited the EMD yet or anything.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Your EMD has nothing to do with when you accepted the offer. Period. If I send you an offer and you send me back acceptance today, and then you have 2 days to change the status. By Saturday, if you don't change the status and I go in, I hit that little report this listing button and report it, you're going to get the violation. It's just how it works. It's not like the MLS isn't going through and going, oh, I wonder if this is still active or not. It's the other agents are reporting you. And if they report you, you're going to get the violation. And here's the problem. Even if, let's say the violation is $100, right? If you want to fight a violation and not pay it, it costs you $100 just to fight the violation. Right? So if you have a violation that's $250 or a violation that's $100, you have to pay $100 just to get a hearing to fight the violation. And then if you lose, you still have to pay the violation. So if you have a $100 violation, guess what you should just do? Pay the $100. Don't fight it. Because even if you win, it costs you $100. So just keep in mind that the CRMLS is very strict. And if you don't believe that the other agents out there in the world are going to report you for the little violations, you're crazy, because it happens all the time. You guys have no idea how many times we're going through trying to fix things, right? Some violations in the MLS are things that can be fixed, but other times they are just straight to fine, right? Using the wrong pictures, straight to fine. Those are the things you have to work out. I mean, they do keep a record of the violations, right? Somebody asked, did the CRMLS keep record? Yes, they do. And you get a certain amount of violations, and they suspend you from the MLS. I can't remember what it is. I think it's 4, but don't quote me on it. I don't remember. But there is a number that if you keep getting to violations, they will suspend you. Like, it's enough. You don't follow the rules. Before, there was a question. This is, what proof do you have to show in order to prove you show the property? I don't know what proof. I don't work for the CRMLS. All I'm saying is if somebody reports you, the CRMLS is going to look into it, and they're going to ask you for things. I don't know what the proof is that they would ask for. Okay, so this is more the data that's on the address. If you want to opt out of stuff, all of those things. It's going to have the property address. You can opt out of not the MLS, but the internet, which means that it won't. Your seller can opt out so it won't syndicate. It'll still be in the MLS, but it won't go to all the websites like Realtor.com and Zillow and Trulia and all those things, okay? Comments and reviews, the ability to write comments and reviews on the property on those sites, or the ability to link to another site containing such comments or reviews if the link is in immediate conjunction with the property display, just letting you know that there will be comments online about it. The automated estimate of value, those are, those AVMs and things that you get from like Realtor Property Resources or Zillow, all of that. That's just saying that it's going to be part of that. Seller representations. Seller represents that unless otherwise specified in writing, seller is unaware of any notices of default, any delinquencies, any lawsuits. That's what they're saying there. Like, there's nothing that's going to affect the sale of this house that I'm aware of, and that you're not there and I'm disclosing to you. The brokers and the seller's duties. We're not going to read each one of these, but it just is, hey, the seller is going to be responsible to provide you with all the reports. The broker is going to guide you through it. Okay? The broker's going to put it in the MLS. The broker's going to be professional, all those things. The presentation of offer. Broker agrees to present all offers received for seller's property and present them to seller as soon as possible, unless seller gives broker written instructions to the contrary. So, guys, you have to present every offer you receive. Okay? Now, you could have something in writing from your seller that says, I don't want to see any offers that are below a certain price. I don't want to see any offers that are this kind of financing. I don't want to see if you have written instructions from your seller, that's fine. What'll happen is if you refuse to present an offer, the board gets involved, the CRMLS gets involved. You'd have to show proof of that written instruction from your seller, and then you'll be fine. Okay? But you are required to present all offers. That means even if you've accepted an offer already and you get another offer, you still have to present that offer, okay? Seller instructs broker not to present buyer letters. We've talked about those in the past, right? Those are the love letters from a buyer to seller about why they want to buy, or you should pick them. Whether submitted with any offer or separately at a different time, seller authorizes broker to specify in the MLS that buyer letters will not be presented to the seller. Or you can check this box that, yes, we want the seller's letters, the buyer's letters, okay? Seller agrees to consider offers presented by broker and to act in good faith to accomplish the sale of the property by, among other things, making the property available for showing at reasonable times and subject to paragraph 3F, referring to broker all inquiries of any party interested in the property. Seller is responsible for determining at what price to list and sell the property. Investigations and reports. Seller agrees within 5 days of the beginning date of this agreement to order and, when required by the service provider, pay for a natural hazard zone disclosure report and the following reports: structural pest control, general property inspection, homeowner association documents, preliminary title report, roof inspection, pool inspection, septic sewer inspection, or other. Okay, so you could put in your listing agreement that the seller's going to provide all of these things and they're going to get them within 5 days of the acceptance. Okay. How soon do you have to present the offer? Technically, you have to present it. Depends on the expiration of the offer, but 99% of offers were going to be within 3 days of the receipt of the offer. Okay. Seller further agrees to indemnify, defend, and hold broker harmless from all claims, disputes, litigation, judgments, attorney fees, and costs arising from incorrect or incomplete information supplied by the seller, or from any material facts that seller knows but fails to disclose, including dangerous or hidden conditions of the property. Okay. The deposit, it says like, hey, we're authorized to accept and hold on seller's behalf any deposits. You're not holding, as listing agent, you're not holding any deposits. Okay. This is about the disclosure regarding agency relationships, and it explains dual agency. It just goes into that confirmation and more disclosures about that agency relationship disclosure that we did last week. This one, I will tell you right here, 13 is important that you have this conversation with your clients. Okay. I'm going to read it. Broker is not responsible for loss of or damage to personal or real property or person, whether attributable to use of a key safe lockbox, a showing of the property, or otherwise. Third parties, including but not limited to appraisers, inspectors, brokers, and prospective buyers, may have access to and take videos and photographs of the interior of the property. Seller agrees to take reasonable precautions to safeguard and protect valuables that might be accessible during showings of the property. To obtain insurance to protect against these risks, broker does not maintain insurance to protect seller. Persons visiting the property may not be aware that they could be recorded by audio or visual devices installed by seller. Seller is advised to post notice disclosing the existence of security devices. So, two things. The conversation with your seller is always this: hey, listen, we're holding open houses and we're going to be doing showings with a key safe lockbox, which means somebody may not be here all the time. If you have anything that you don't want to lose, you have anything that you do not want to have stolen, you have something that you do not want to be broken, put it away. Don't leave it out. Because if something happens to it during an open house or a showing, I'm not responsible. Okay? So, anything of value, put it away. Anything you can't afford to have broken or stolen, put it away. Hide it. And I've told you guys in the past, medications, put them away. Hide them. Lock them up. Do not leave them in the medicine cabinet. Okay? Because I knew people in the past that used to go to open houses just so they could go through medicine cabinets. Okay? So, please have that conversation with them. If you can't afford to lose it, then make sure it's somewhere safe when we're doing showings and open houses, which means all the time. Okay. And if they have security cameras, you have to ask them, by the way, do you guys have security cameras? Great. We have to post signs during open houses and showings that people are under surveillance. Okay. You have to post it. Sorry. The photographs on the internet, we're not going to read this whole thing. It's just letting them know that, hey, your pictures of your property are going to be on the internet. That's basically it. Okay. The key safe and lockbox, this is just letting them know that, hey, look, there's going to be a lockbox, or if you check the box, you don't want the lockbox on here. But it's just there's going to be a lockbox, and there's going to be certain hours and times that people are going to be able to access the property. And that's it. Tenant-occupied property. If seller does not occupy the property, seller shall be responsible for obtaining occupants' written permission for use of the key safe lockbox. Seller does or does not want to sign. That's it. Equal housing. We're not going to discriminate against anybody that wants to write an offer on this house. If there's any attorney fees that come up from a dispute, everybody's going to be responsible for their own attorney fees. any additional terms, right? If this is an REO listing, you're going to put that. If it's a short sale, you're going to put the short sale information advisory. If it's a trust with a successor trustee selling it, you're going to put the trust advisory in. And if you want to make this subject to them finding a replacement property, you can check the box here. We have the right to approve or disapprove of any of your listings within 5 days after you sign it. So if you have a listing today that you sign that we don't like the terms of, within 5 days of that signing, we can disregard the listing. We have the right to approve or disapprove of those listings, management or broker. Okay. Successors and assigns. This agreement shall be binding upon seller and seller successors and assigns. So what that means is this: if I am the seller, I sign the listing agreement, and if something happens to me, I pass away, whoever is my successor, they have to still move on with the listing. The basically what they're saying is the listing survives me. Okay. Dispute resolution, mediation, and if we do have an arbitration agreement, this is between broker and seller, we would go to arbitration, but for sure we have to go through mediation first, just like we do with between buyer and seller. The entire agreement, anything that we discussed, if it's not in here, it doesn't exist. This is just saying ownership and title authority is saying that, hey, the seller is dictating that they have full ownership and authority to sell the property. Unless there's some other kind of question, then you would list it here. The legally authorized signer, they're going to have to show proof that they are legally authorized to sign on behalf of an entity, a trust, an LLC, a power of attorney, those things, okay? That's what this is, an entity seller. If we complete this property properly, we do not need an RCSD, the representative capacity signature disclosure form, but if we don't fill in all this information, then we could need an RCSD. And if you do that, within 5 days of this, you need proof that they are the authorized signer for that entity. So you would need something like a copy of the notarized power of attorney, or a copy of the LLC, or a copy of the trust, something that shows that they could sign. So the seller signs it, puts their title if it's applicable, you sign it, put your information in, and we're good to go. We have a listing. Once you get that listing, you turn that listing into our listing coordinator, so we have a record of it. That listing coordinator can order a sign up for you guys. Once you put it in the MLS and do all those things, they can help you with the MLS input. All that stuff happens, but you got to make sure that you leave a copy of the fully executed listing the minute you sign it. So if you are a listing agent and you're on your listing presentation, and you go there with paper listings, you better have 2 full copies, have them sign both copies, and leave one and take one. That's why digital signatures are great. So if you're doing live digital signatures, like on your iPad or on your computer, they'll automatically get a copy when it's emailed. It is troublesome if you do not leave them immediately a copy of the listing agreement. If I walk away without a copy of the listing agreement and send them to a later date, they could dispute whether or not they had a legal listing, and they could fight it. Okay. All right. So that's it. We finished the listing agreement. Do you guys have any questions? No? You understand it? Well, hopefully this will give you some confidence to go take listings, go on listing appointments. But if you have any other questions, you guys can let me know. Other than that, well, let's see. We got another message here showing up in the... Oh, no, just a thank you. Okay. No other questions. All right. Terrific, guys. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. Have a fantastic day. Go out there, be safe and productive. Talk to you soon.